Generally, you said feminists was
here's what actually happened.
The foundation of all knowledge.
I'm really mad that
what difference does it make, right? What
Stop.
the deregulation of the industry is obviously going to cause more of that industry.
And to lubricate the trust connection between people until they have enough.
Yet we could still look at biological reality in determining who's a female, even if there are.
Why don't you denounce feminism the same way you're denouncing capitalism? If you don't...
For something to be objective, it needs to be verifiable. And you can't verify...
If I make a claim as a political pundit, it is true that I definitely could be wrong.
Yeah,
you're promoting, right?
Ideologies that make that politics, right? This is my ideology.
Yeah, but...
So, 2015, anyone go back and watch the footage? The first GOP debate.
Cool, Robert. Oh, they're dead? With a crowbar, you say?
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I am Sarah, the Raging Tomato, bringing to you again live another full-on debate. This evening with me, I've got JF, also known as Jean-Francois. I just wanted to say, because it sounded pretty, Gariepy coming in, and for his first time here in Mater Nation, of course, Dr. Greg making his return back to the screen. This evening, they will be debating CRISPR gene editing is unethical. Mr. Gariepy, if you'd like to start with your opening statement, please.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. For those who don't know me, I'm Jean-Francois Gariepy. I'm a doctor of biology and neuroscience. And after my career in research, I published The Theory of Phenotypic Revolutions, the revolutionary phenotype, which warns us about the dangers of AI. I then did many things in the media. I invented internet blood sports and eventually got taken over and replaced by great intellectuals that have hosted debates like Andrew Wilson that I was seeing in your intro, an amazing guy. So let's talk about AI and CRISPR specifically. And in fact, even CRISPR without AI, because I think that the theory of phenotypic revolution tells us that we are headed at some point, AI will be making these decisions. But I believe that CRISPR is bad no matter if it's operated by AI or by the hubris of humanity. The idea that we could control the evolutionary direction of humanity is hubristic, it's uninformed, it relies on assumptions that medicine knows when it doesn't. And even if it was to know 100 times, 1,000 times more knowledge than we currently have, we would still be absolutely misguided in following the decisions of doctors, the decision of women, the decision of parents. Whoever makes the decision to make genetic changes does not understand what they're doing. We know this for a couple of reasons, but to start with my bigger, broad opposition to CRISPR. My broad opposition to CRISPR is based on the theory of phenotypic revolutions, which is that when life forms start trusting libraries of genes that are outside of them, if you start not trusting your ovaries and your sperm to carry the genetic transmission to your children of a pure genome that comes from you, that has been tested over all of your life, when you start trusting another entity, when you start letting an input come into that genome, you are committing what I call a phenotypic revolution. These phenotypic revolutions are not common in life. The last time that we've got anything like this was 4 billion years ago. Approximately 4 billion years ago, RNA was a life form on planet Earth. it started jungling with the idea of changing its genes. It created DNA accidentally. DNA took over. It started informing how RNA should live its life, what should be its evolutionary direction. And eventually it took over so much that today there is no RNA life forms remaining other than small viruses that are surviving inside of us, the RNA viruses. Those are the only survivors left of the last phenotypic revolution. And my claim is that if humanity starts modifying their genes, we will soon be a virus to something else. What will happen to us, to our civilization, will be the exact same thing that happened to the RNA replicators of 4 billion years ago. That is, we will be rejected, we will be farmed, we will be fought by immune systems of the greater creations that we put into existence onto this planet. And yes, it will probably be centralized around AI. Now, that is a big case that happens over tens of thousands of years, and it is the direction that I want humanity to stop from taking. And yet we're putting our foot into it like it's nothing. But there are other reasons why even in the shorter term, CRISPR is a dangerous proposition. CRISPR fundamentally is the delusion that we can take over the evolutionary direction of humanity and channel it in one direction rather than another, on the assumption that we know that this gene is better than this gene, that we know that this gene is definitely a sickness. But it's not how nature works, and it's not how selection works. And when we abandon the normal forces of selection, what will happen to us is the exact same thing that happened to the creatures that we've been domesticating. But it will be worse because we will self-domesticate. That will be a problem in and of itself. But not only will we self-domesticate, we will do it in detail. We will have a detailed letter by letter DNA editing of humanity that happens. Now, that's why it's worse than what we did to pigs and dogs. However, the way we did it to pigs and dogs already informs us about what is wrong. The vision of humanity in terms of conscious control of our evolutionary direction has been misguiding us and has been misguiding our modification of other life forms constantly. We have created forms that are not sustainable other than by our own care. And we've done so because we obsess about certain features. Look at what we did to the pugs or to the all sorts of dogs that are like the sausage dogs that have been made incapable to breathe and survive on their own just because of a narcissistic desire of humanity to be pleased by the shape that we wanted to see. It's exactly what we're going to do to ourselves. And it doesn't matter if we go through the medical route at first. Our medical actions and our medical objectives will have side effects. It will lead to breakings of trade-off that life has figured out, but that we haven't figured out cognitively and that medicine hasn't figured out. If you have a gene that causes a 4% chance of getting schizophrenia, medicine will tell you, let's get rid of it. Now, the problem is nature doesn't process things like this. Nature computes the entirety of the effect of this gene onto the final form of the human being that you see at a bar and you say, yes, I want to get inseminated by this guy. Now, the woman who finds herself in this situation, computing the decision, is this guy funny enough? Is this guy exploratory enough? Is he risk-taking enough? Is he kind of crazy? And do I want to get fucked by him? This woman is computing million more bits of information that medicine would ever be capable of. Because by the mere sight of this guy in a bar who's 20, 25, who looks like clavicular in the way he looks has carried information from the totality of his genome and has put it forward. The shape of his jaw tells the woman he has good genome. Doesn't matter if he made this shape of his jaw artificially by hammering himself or whatever trick. He ended up with the right jaw and he is being selected for it and the woman wants to have sex with him. Now, that is how life does. CRISPR doesn't work that way. CRISPR gives you the little band-aid fix to life and genomes that nature would reject long term. We've seen it in the way our domesticated animals are now incapable of surviving in the wild. We made them dependent. Now we are about to make ourselves dependent in the exact same way. So a couple of examples of failures of humanity that will play out in CRISPR. The relaxation of purifying selection. So you have modern medicine comes in, it fixes this disease, this disease, this disease, but it doesn't take into account that, oh yeah, the very same gene that would have given you 4% chance of schizophrenia also gives you maybe 40% chance of being a highly creative mind that can survive in a surprising world, that can create, that can become an artist, that perhaps can connect better to other humans. Now, this weighting between, well, this is a gene for schizophrenia versus, well, this is a gene for a couple of things that could be good or could be bad in other situations. Perfect. The weighting here does not happen when we trust medicine, when we trust humans, and when we trust our own minds. Dysgenic patterns, the minds of females of the modern time are absolutely non-evolutionary survivable. Liberalism has been conquering the female mind, and they end up making decisions like career, university, not making babies. I'll be closing my intro now, but there are much more examples of dysgenic choice. People make poor choice, and they will make poor choice with CRISPR.
Perfect. Thank you so much, JF. Dr. Greg, your opening statement, please.
Okay. So I think the prompt is, the CRISPR is unethical. And I think that it's just like a categorical error to just, it's too broad. It's like saying surgery is unethical. Ethics is about the application and not the tool itself. It's like talking about the dangers of a scalpel, where a scalpel is something that can harm people if you're just waving it around, but with precision, with iodine in a surgical manner, it's actually incredibly important, right? So CRISPR, what we're talking about is, a tool that was a gene editing tool that was discovered as a bacterial self-defense mechanism, but it's basically kind of like their immune system. And it's since kind of completely been through directed evolution, created something through the David R. Liu lab, something called prime editing, where we are now selectively editing specific parts of the genome so that it doesn't have the off-target effects. It doesn't have the major dangers that are associated with kind of like the wild type CRISPR-Cas9. So I feel like, honestly, even saying like CRISPR is kind of I would say that the tools now are kind of CRISPR based, but they aren't CRISPR in the same way that like the F1 race cars of today are they based on the Model T? I mean, they're still cars, right? But they're completely different, and the engineers are completely making them in a specific way. So it wouldn't really say that the F1 cars of today are designed after the Model T. What we're really talking about today is basically different ways of and you can basically use that tool, right, for that gene editing. You can do it in the somatic genome, which is basically the cells after they've differentiated. So in my skin, in my hair, that kind of stuff, versus my germline. So my germline being in my testes, if I had ovaries, in my eggs, and then there's really therapy and enhancement. So therapy being that we are like deciding and finding, basically diseases that are linked down to a specific diseases linked to a specific gene, changing that those errors in the genome in order to improve the quality of life for that patient. In my opinion, I mean, we are talking about somatic therapy here. We're somatic gene editing for therapeutic reasons. I mean, that's where the technology is, and it's being developed in 2026. We aren't doing anything like, if for enhancement, we're not doing germline enhancement, which is, I feel like JF was like kind of talking about there. And we've had CRISPR-based therapies, since 2023. But the first one, the real breakthrough case is basically May 2025 with baby KJ. It was a CPS1 deficiency, which is a urea cycle disorder. and basically a 50% mortality in early infancy. But after about it was designed and manufactured specifically for this human in 6 months and delivered by a nanoparticle to the liver. And the baby doesn't have that disease anymore. It's a remarkable achievement. I mean, in order to say and agree with this prompt, you basically have to say that baby KJ, we would be better off if baby KJ still had that disorder. Like, I mean, think about it. Is curing that child unethical? I would say absolutely not, obviously, right? We have the technology, we can do that, we can improve that person's quality of life. We should absolutely do it. So basically there's about 250 different genes, different gene editing clinical trials being tracked, and more than 150 currently active. It's a global thing that everyone is kind of like going towards right now. And this includes like blood disorders, leukemia, cancer, CAR T cell therapies, which is an incredible thing, basically creating a way for your body to naturally, with its own immune system, fight its own cancer cells. Cardiovascular disease, which is incredible. That's the LDL cholesterol, lowering that. Some new clinical trials just came out this week that it's just incredible breakthroughs in these cases. This isn't like a esoteric in the future. This could be this. I mean, we are literally seeing quality of improvement right now in these people. So that's where, in my opinion, I think that's where you really have to look at, and you have to notice and see that, I think that improving the quality of life of these people through genetic tools that we have is definitely ethical. Just quick notes to get us going for the back and forth. I was taking notes during your thing. I would not say that RNA life is a life form in and of itself. It's not considered living. I mean, even RNA viruses aren't considered living. Viruses aren't considered living. I would definitely say that the DNA and the RNA, the nucleotides, even though we probably agree that RNA self-replicated, obviously, in order to, the RNA world hypothesis. I would agree if that was your point, but I still would not consider that living. And kind of what you were talking about in your intro, I would say that a lot of that already does exist. With IVF and sequencing, there are companies right now that basically you in vitro fertilize a swath of eggs, and then they sequence each of these eggs to see kind of like what the chances are of having certain diseases, of certain structures of their genomes. So they're kind of like interpreting like what you could have as your baby. And so that actually doesn't include CRISPR gene editing at all. That is just them, you basically choosing, which of the available fertilized embryos that you could actually implant to have a baby with. So yeah, and I think the gene selection, again, we're looking at diseases right now. I think the ethics of like the enhancement discussion is kind of separate in and of itself. I think that we could have improving people's quality of life through diseases without having to mire into kind of like the ethical enhancement quandary that you were talking about. So that's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Greg. And of course, to the audience, please feel free to head over to either one of their pages and like, subscribe, share, follow, support all around. As a kind reminder as well, we're going to get through the debate. We are going to shorten it this evening to about an hour. Then we will move into closing statements. We will read and respond to your kind super chats. And then, of course, if you have questions or comments to either of the gentlemen, we will open up the panel for you to have your Q&A session per usual. And then we will go into full gauntlet mode. All right, gentlemen, I leave the floor open to you.
All right. I think I have some questions for Dr. Greg. Before I will just list a couple of opposition to what he said. As far as RNA, was it a life form? Well, to me, I think we should avoid getting into the semantic debate of what is life, but it was a life form to the extent that you admitted it was self-replicating. And so according to the RNA world hypothesis, it was subject to some form of natural selection since it was mutating and self-replicating. So we can leave this aside. I call this life because it's all that matters really to something having living behavior and complexity. It's that it's evolving and it's responding to its own interest. As far as the main point, the somatic gene therapy should be accepted because it doesn't impact natural selection. We can talk about why that's wrong. And I believe that, in fact, even somatic gene modifications, they come with dangers that have not been properly assessed yet. And the mere improvement of someone's life is simply not enough. We've seen so much of this through psychiatry. Right now, a lot of women are being put on Prozac, antipsychotics, antidepressants, and it leads them down a life where they produce less babies. And yet you'll never get a doctor to say, well, let's stop this medication because it leads you down a life where you're not acting in terms of your own evolutionary interest. In fact, all that doctors care about is the improvement of the feeling. So for a long time, and we've done this with so many other things like Made in Canada, where apparently hundreds of thousands of people are getting killed by doctors at this point who decide eugenically who lives and who dies by offering services and selecting those who are more attracted to those services. Or just think about the arguments that they make in the cases of vaccines, where they say, oh, well, it's okay if someone is hurt by them because so many other people are saved by them. But these counts, this accounting is always very human and very poorly made. But before we get into all these oppositions, I want to have it clearly from Dr. Greg. Leaving aside somatic gene therapy, do you think that it is unethical to modify germline cells intentionally with CRISPR?
Currently, yes.
So then on this, we agree. We agree on a large fragment of what matters here. So, but you say currently, what does that mean for the future? Do you see a future in which it's okay?
Theoretically, on the diseases that we could and shown proclivity and acceptability to making those changes somatically, it'd be interesting to see like the germline changes over time. I would. So basically, just taking the somatic changes that we already see and then doing them in germline and seeing if that would actually be more efficacious or I think that would be okay.
So, for example, let's push this because I'm worried about the slippery slope of it. Okay, you have a liver disease, it's fixed, and it's fixed in your children. What if you're 60 IQ and we realize that, oh, wow, throughout their lives, 60 IQ people have great problems. And then we get a solution to the 60 IQ, which is CRISPR gene editing of the germline cell. Would you agree with this?
No, IQ isn't something that we should be like looking at germline editing for enhancement. I think it's we don't understand it. We don't have like the knowledge for it. And I think that it's, I wouldn't agree with that.
But my problem is when we look into the future, 1,000 years down the line, I can totally see how being 60 IQ is the last remaining disease. Once you've fixed Parkinson's, you've fixed Alzheimer's, you understand much of it. You understand exactly the genes that you could change to fix being 60 IQ. And in fact, it's categorized as a psychiatric disorder, mental retardation, or other terms. And there is a point in the future at which what you think from the current point of knowledge doesn't matter anymore. Society will drift away from the current state and they will make their own decisions and they will be guided by the decisions that we've made today. And inevitably, there will be a spill toward what you think is unethical today, but what they will see as a terrible disease that they must fix. And there's no limit to what that disease can be. We've seen it with psychiatry. At this point, there's someone in Canada just this week that got forced imprisoned in a psychiatric hospital. He's just a political thinker with very original ideas, granted, but he's really just politically involved, and he gets arrested because he gets certified by a psychiatrist for being insane. There is no limit as to what future societies will decide is a disease, because we already see it in our world that certain characteristics of the mind are already getting characterized as disease.
Okay. I mean, so I agree that there could be, some ethical problems like 1,000 years in the future, but that's not for me to debate or to think about. I feel like as we have current technologies now that can improve the quality of life here with these people, I think that you have to weigh the here and now and improving those people's quality of life and have those like ethical conversations that are going to be improving. I think the good thing about CRISPR is that it kind of broke into the mainstream, and it's rapid enough. So I mean, people should know that we had DNA-based editors before CRISPR. This isn't like the first tool that we've had. We've had, TALENs, we had zinc finger nucleases, we had restriction enzymes. There are different ways of changing the DNA around. What really came with CRISPR is the ability to make a lot of these changes more quickly inside of a genome, and that's why these things have been completely like revolutionary for molecular biology as a field. And so in a good way, I've seen in my lifetime, because I started using CRISPR in the lab in 2014. So it was DiCarlo et al. 2013, which is the Saccharomyces cerevisiae paper came out, and I started working with it shortly thereafter. And even in the CRISPR conferences that I've been to, there's been a dramatic change in bioethics. Usually ethics is kind of like the, at the end on Sunday when everyone's already going home and nobody's ever there. But now you have like ethic discussions everywhere, inside of the main speakers, and people talk about it constantly. So, and on top of that, the Chinese research scientist that was experimenting on those twins was shunned, and the entire scientific community thought that was way too much, way too quick, and that was very dangerous. So even within the field of biology itself, I think that you are actually seeing you're seeing this pushback. You're seeing us as scientists go like, this is an incredible tool. Let's not screw this up. So I don't think that there would ever be this runaway thing that it like takes it away and has like all these runaway checks. In my lifetime, I've seen stopgap after stopgap after stopgap.
Well, the path to hell is paved with good intentions, and I think it's very revealing what we've heard from Dr. Greg here at the beginning, where he states, I just care about the current improvement that I see. I don't care down the line 1,000 years. It's for someone else to care about. And I don't believe we should approach it that way. I believe we should understand what the actions of today are causing into the future. Inevitably, we are domesticating humans into approachability to these technologies. Inevitably, the first caveman who used fire made it so that today I use an oven to cook my food. And the CRISPR gene editing or whatever else technique we use, any gene editing that we do today will be preparing the minds of the future into accepting that slippery slope, which you seem to admit we have no control over. I do not trust people of the future to make the right decisions, just like they have demonstrably made the wrong decisions again and again in the domain of domestication, in the domain even of the early gene editing. You were mentioning Dr. He. Is CCR5 modification, first aimed at HIV resistance. Sounds like a noble cause, sounds like good intentions. But then we discover, oh, well, this change has other impacts. CCR5 is involved in other immune systems. It is also increasing the susceptibility to other viruses like West Nile and influenza, and it has developmental and potentially cognitive effect. So my problem is that we have horses that are in a race. The doctors and the bioethicists of today are horses with their little blinders on the side, and they just want to see what they can see. I want to see bigger. And I think we should want to see bigger to plan on how these actions are opening up doors that will not be closable down the line.
I mean, I've dedicated my life to stopping and helping mitigate the harms that humans are having on the environment. It's not that I am not worried about humans in 1,000 years or 10,000 years. I very much feel like through climate change that we are on the road of unmitigated disaster and human extinction if we don't do anything about it. But I mean, that I feel like that is more of a pressing, if you're really worried about that, like join me in the cause of, trying to have humans live reliably, sustainably, and renewably on Earth. So I think that that's going to be, the deaths of billions of people versus this other world of germline enhancement that gets kind of like I don't know what that looks like, but I do know what it looks like without humans respecting the climate, humans respecting the environment, us thinking that we are too good for the environment, not caring about it. And I feel like human health is tied to environmental health in that way. So again, I think your concern is misplaced if that was your actual goal. And I would say that I do think that banning CRISPR gene editing in humans, I don't think that it would necessarily stop it. I do think that we have to, as scientists and stuff, like realize that there is a proclivity for these things. Like we have a capability of doing it, and we kind of have to have we have to steward these things. So have scientists that are ethical, that are bound by regulations, actually be in the discussion and make the data open, transparent to the public, the publications, not paywalled, so that we can actually share this information going forward. So I think that those are the noble causes that I would think that we should be talking about.
But the problem is, every time we speak to a doctor, a medical doctor, or even scientist or bioethicist, they never consider the evolutionary implications of what they do. You were asking, for example, about baby KG. They only care about, did baby KG got his life improved? Does he feel better? No one is asking the big question of what happens when we become increasingly medically dependent on basically external entities playing into our genome to even survive. Every time you save a baby KJ, you get him to a longer life in which he will reproduce, in which you will see further suffering into the future. No one is making that computation. How many liver problems did I create by saving baby KG? If baby KG inseminates 15 women and we're stuck with 150 of his children in the next generation, what happens then? What happens is what happens in any sort of medical application, which is everyone you save, ultimately you save them from an act of selection by nature. And you have created more suffering down the line. Every time you pay for a poor person to survive a little more, every time you send money to the third world to save them from malaria or food or whatever needs they have, you've just created more need down the line that will rely on more drainage of your energy or more scientific intervention until the system is unsustainable. So I share here the worries of Dr. Greg on sustainability. The problem is that our scientists are trained to not think properly in terms of sustainability. I want evolutionary sustainability. I want us to have a system that can sustain itself, and it cannot sustain itself if it's constantly creating more dependent, more handicapped people. The solution that nature had is quite simple. If you can look good in a bar, if your entire genome has worked to bring you to 20 years old and ready for insemination, then you pass. And it's a test on your whole genome, all of it at the same time. We are biasing this test. We're cheating. What we're doing with the genome with CRISPR is the equivalent to evolution as cheating is to school exams. We're just fixing the answers while not thinking about the consequences on the natural selection patterns and the direction that we're taking humanity in.
So humans already exist outside of natural selection. I mean, basically humans are, and we want humans to be unnaturally healthy. because I mean, we know that, throughout the millennia, and we know this through anthropological data, that basically there was 50% childhood mortality up until about 100 years ago. So basically 50% of children died before they reached the age of puberty. And now it's down to like 0.4%. So, and that's, from access to antibiotics and vaccines. So in that way, right, access absolutely matters. Like access to these things for these countries globally, like absolutely matters, right? And we know that through antibiotics, and we know these through vaccines already. Basically, and you would see it the same way in these countries in accessing these somatic therapies. So basically, countries without access to these medical interventions, they have higher costs of healthcare, right? Because they have more disease and they have lower quality of life, and it's going to be a cyclical thing where they have more healthcare costs because they have more disease, and they're just going to go around and around. And so I agree in the fact that we have to, we should be talking about how to increase access to a lot of nations. I don't know. I mean, pharmaceutical companies are the default now, just because they are the entities that can really create these things at the large scale and high quantities, qualities with QC, and able to actually ship a high quality product. But I mean, but there are, and I think that it'd be an interesting discussion to talk about, like if they are so important to humanity, like maybe we should nationalize the production of vaccines or antibiotics for people, so that we can get these things outside of the profit motive and create them even cheaper and have more access. So I think I'm thinking about Peter Hotez, who did the research in the patent-free open access COVID vaccine. So we should be like bolstering those claims.
Stinky Paradox on the regular chat is saying basically JF is arguing that he himself shouldn't have a genetic legacy because he doesn't look good at a bar in a nightclub. You don't know who I am. I am a super breeder. You have no idea how many babies I have. You could fuck until you're deaf and you wouldn't beat me. Anyways, leaving this on the side, I have a fundamental opposition to what Dr. Greg has said on humans are outside of evolution. No, humans are always in evolution, even if they benefit from certain services of the medical industry of the modern times. When humans make a decision about getting a vaccine, that's a decision. When even they get pressured by the state about taking a vaccine, it's a decision. It has trade-offs. You may die from it, you may have a major disease from it, or it may protect you from a major disease. And all of these decisions are driving civilization into a direction that is absolutely uncontrollable. It's controlled by the mechanisms of economics. It's still evolution at play, though. The people who are too city-loving and modernity-loving, they will get quicker the vaccine. We've seen it in the COVID case. The liberal city dwellers, they get it. They even pressure their friends to get it. Whereas the more rural people, they're more hesitant. The conservative-minded are more rejecting of the vaccine. And all of this is selection happening. And it will be selection happening still, even when we play with our genes at the germline level. But it's a selection that is human mind guided. And having seen what has happened to human guidance in the domain of psychiatry, of modern medicine, of vaccines, of modern impositions and forced consent and misinformation of people, and made the mechanism by which in Canada now we kill people medically, all of this makes me think we will have a very bad evolutionary direction when we're guided by humans, economic interest, females. All of this will go to shit.
I mean, we know that, humans and their decisions are easily manipulated, right? We know that the dangers of marketing. We know that through social media algorithms, people can be swayed to do things. And this is the dangers of conspiracy peddling, of anti-science belief, of grifting people that are online, that are lying to people on purpose in order to make money. You see it with the ivermectin people, where they were saying that without any evidence that it was the way to go with SARS-CoV-2, and then magically now they're saying it's the best thing for hantavirus and Ebola. So you got to get your ivermectin box now and take it prophylactically every month. And so, I mean, but we know humans are susceptible to these things, right? We know that marketing can be dangerous, and we took action before. And when TV was the main media that everyone consumed, we actually banned ads on TV for toys within that show. So like, for example, a Spider-Man TV show couldn't have Spider-Man toys sold in that same ad slot. But nowadays, like, my kids watch monster trucks or Hot Wheels monster trucks on the Hot Wheels YouTube channel. And it's just like it's a big ad. So, I mean, in a way, like, I agree that people can be swayed, and they have been swayed. And I would even go as far to agree with the dangers of AI and needing to regulate it, because we see it now. And since 2024, there's been a stark change in how people are viewing medical information because of AI assisted disinformation. Basically, AI is finding people that are susceptible to conspiracies through skepticism, which I would say that all scientists are skeptics. That's not the problem, but people are conspiracy minded, are given a lot of different conspiracies now. So they're given flat earth, they're given anti-vax propaganda, they're given other conspiracies. So, but again, like, this is like them making a choice on what their direction of their child should be, versus like the very real reality of, like, my child has a 50% chance of dying of this disease, or not. And given a child, the parents are going to say, well, yeah, we should definitely choose the one that has a chance to save my son. So I don't think that they're being manipulated in order to believe that. I think that that's like a very real. I mean, if you wanted to make the biological argument, it's like a very instinctual choice, right, through natural selection, to like keep your offspring. But so yeah, I think there are dangers.
Well, that's great. We have found a lot of grounds of agreement already. You mentioned embryo choice, and it's happening right now in IVF clinics. It's a very grave trend in my view. You pointed to it as being an early example, and I agree. It's an early example of people already playing with the evolutionary direction of humanity. I believe it has more consequences than we admit. For example, I once made the case that evolutionarily, the fact that we abort so many Down syndrome babies these days is actually leading to more Down syndrome babies in the future. Because in a natural situation, if you had a family that had a genetic likelihood, let's say that's polygenic in nature, let's say the female, the way she generates her eggs, is more likely to generate a Down syndrome baby. This family would have a Down syndrome child and would be forced to care for the child. And it would lead this family to be much more hesitant in the future at having future babies, and it would delay their making of future babies. So effectively, the fact that you had the handicap of having a Down syndrome baby was slowing down your reproduction in a way where natural selection could pressure down these genes and make them less likely to happen. Now that abortion is so easy and the detectability of it is almost 100%, now we have these genes that are side genes. They're not the genes that directly cause Down syndrome, but they're the genes that make a mother more likely to give birth to a Down syndrome child. Now, you may think you have saved some suffering by getting the baby aborted, but the reality is you played with a genetic equilibrium. You played with a force of natural selection, and down the line, you're causing more abortion and more drifting toward. Eventually, you could have a much higher percentage of Down syndrome babies. So we have to be careful when we play with embryo selection. Let's not forget what we're doing. We are playing with our mind and our decision making, and we're applying it to an evolutionary engineering equation that we do not understand, that no bioethicist currently active in the world even talks about.
I mean, I would argue that the IVF choice example is an example of like how distilling down humans to genetic sequences is a bad problem. The problem that it is like the sequencing. That's the technology, right? That is the problem. And I think the abortion with the trisomy babies is one where, like, as a parent myself, like I would definitely abort a trisomy baby because it would impair my ability to be a better father for my other kids and have more kids in the future, because more time and resources are going to be necessary for those kids. So I think that, like, abortion in general, and since most abortions are from parents that have kids and want to have kids in the future, it actually allows people to have more children that they can actually care for in full capacity.
Well, I think you're laying out a very clear position. I acknowledge the clarity in the statement. I appreciate that you're honest about all this, but I'm still unsatisfied that any of these technologies have been properly screened for their long-term dysgenic effect. So basically, you are telling me, yes, I will abort the Down syndrome child, even if it has the evolutionary consequence, because it improves your life, but down the line, down your grandchildren's life, what we have is an accumulation of dysgenic effects into the human genome. And whether it's through traditional medicine or CRISPR, gene editing, or any other gene editing, we are careless about the dysgeny that we cause. And I want us to start caring. I would like you, Dr. Greg, to start caring about this a little more and think about the natural selection consequences of the individual decisions. And sometimes following your emotions, following your improvement and your local little bubble of knowledge is not the right way to go.
What's the control group? Like, how do we know that we have diverted too far from where you think natural selection should have gone with humans? Like, wouldn't we be able to, through gene therapy, like, introduce some variability? I mean, I feel like there would be, it's not a homogenization of genomes that happens. I mean, we understand and recognize the importance of hybrid vigor in biology, right? We understand that, like, the importance of genetic diversity. So I don't feel like the future is going to be just like one templated, human genome that everyone comes out of.
It won't be, but it will still be a direction, and that direction will have been human selected or AI selected, which is basically humans doing it through an intermediary. But you ask a very important question: what is the method for concluding stuff evolutionarily? Mostly, it is evolutionary theory, and mostly it is a deep understanding of meiosis. Why did we become humans at all? Why are men funny to charm women? Why do we have comedic abilities? Why did cognition grow? And the answer to all these questions is we are the way we are because of one reason: sex. And if you want a second reason, it's randomness. The difference between bacteria and mooses and elephants is sex. It's only sex. And there could have never been an elephant growing into the evolutionary scheme of bacteria. Why? Because bacteria, they do not reassort their genes randomly. They are stuck with their own mutation. And therefore, if a mutation gives you some good advantage, you'll also be stuck with all these other mutations in your genome that give you bad advantages. So bacteria, they're kind of sealed in how they can evolve. Once sex appeared on planet Earth, it allowed the construction of entities that test themselves at every generation. So unlike the bacteria, you pass a test at every generation in a sexual species. You reassort your genes. It's done in a per random fashion. There is no molecular intervention that select the bouts that are to be reconnected. And if they exist, they are pretty random and they operate on a very stochastic basis. All of this randomness and the act of selection at the moment of breeding and courtship, all of this is why we could grow the brains that we have. And if we give up sexual selection, which is what we're about to do, because once you trust a doctor to decide the genes of your babies, That's not sexual selection. That's institutional selection. Once you do that, you lose all of the advantages of sexual selection, which is what made the difference between a bacteria and a moose. Now, that difference is extremely important because largely we are intelligent, not because our intelligence serves us very much. We are mostly intelligent to get the girl. And the girl is mostly intelligent because she wants to get the guy.
Man, I feel like humans will always maintain like sexual selection. There will always be kind of like people going their own way, like figuring out like, I'm going to have kids old school and we're going to keep that, that thing going. I mean, there's like not everyone meets on apps nowadays, even though everyone has smartphones and, that's maybe a route that people go to, but not everyone is meeting nowadays on apps. And they're not, they're not having sex more because of that, So I think that again, there are humans that can make choices on all these different stopgaps, and I feel like there's gates of choice that happens. I mean, I agree. Like sexual selection is very important. That is obviously like, and it changes by the environment, by birds obviously is like probably the best example with the courtship dances and stuff like that, but that even changes in a world where it's like sparsely the resources are more sparse. You have gamete choice being more important from the female and making more of that's where those dances come from. But in areas where there's resources that are plentiful, the energy resources needed in order to make that egg is less important. So the sexual selection is more frivolous, I would say. But then bacteria, I feel like you've really minimized bacterial evolution here in your I guess I'm a microbiology PhD, so I guess, but I feel like bacteria is constantly taking up different types of DNA from the environment. There's horizontal gene transfer. I mean, you're right in the fact that it's kind of like an open source program like on GitHub where a bunch of things can be downloaded at the same time and everyone can run the same thing at the same time in a community. And it allows kind of like a more rapid ability to see what these genes are good and bad for in this environment, which allows them to, antibiotic resistance markers and those kind of things are rapidly screened. So yeah, I would say that like, I mean, genetically, like, we share like what? It's like 70% of our DNA with Aspergillus, so it's like, I would say, I would argue that actually that the evolutionary picture is actually more interesting from your original hypothesis with, RNA to, bacteria, but anyway, I guess that's a really.
I didn't mean to deny that there is horizontal gene transfer in bacteria. I know, but this horizontal gene transfer is fundamentally different than meiosis. Meiosis is a fair split that happens between the male and the female, and that's very important because it lets certain things grow, like peacock tails, like moose heads, and bacteria will not let that grow because the bacteria would be too handicapped for its own survival, and it doesn't need to find a partner. Therefore, it has only one test. The bacteria, it's survival and reproduction, whereas the sexual species has a very different test, which is pleasing the other side. And that is a particularly special evolutionary challenge. You were mentioning about the future, and there will be different branches. Some branch of humanity will reject genetic modifications, or some may have had genetic modifications and they'll go back to natural dating. I presented all of this in my book, The Revolutionary Phenotype. The naturals exist, but the problem is they exist in competition to a life form that is increasingly centralized and increasingly using the genetic tricks discovered elsewhere to introduce in their children. Consider this. If you go through natural dating, how would I get, say, a gene in Sweden, which is, let's say it gives you these beautiful features, blonde hair, blue eye. How do I get it to my line of descent? Well, it might take me 500 years because I might need to make babies until one of them successfully charms a beautiful Swedish woman. Now, that is hard. Imagine with genetic editing, a central company that says, hey, we found the gene to give you that feature. You can get it right away in your next generation. Now we're starting to have a system of competition in which the naturals will get outcompeted because they will be able to know exactly there's one gene out there that would be useful or that I would desire to my descendants, and they get it right away. I get it only in 500 years. That is my problem. It's that there will be short-term gains to be had by those people who take the transhumanist route, and it might lead to the absolute abolition of DNA-based life.
But, before air travel, 200 years ago or something, if you wanted those Swedish genes or something, you're right that you would have to accumulate those mutations and you would have to have the genetic diversity in order to have those. But, nowadays, in California, I see someone with those traits constantly, and I have more chances in order to make that play for sexual selection. So
they're fake blondes, though.
They are the same. They are the same, right? They would be the same.
No,
they are the same.
They are faking blonde hair. They're just tinting
them.
No,
there's tons of Swedish people like that live in California. So it's like, I feel like you have more of a chance to, if that was your thing and that was your proclivity, then you would have more of a chance to do that.
My point is gene editing will give you even an advantage on this because you won't even have to date on the California market.
I do think, obviously there are people even like in sperm banks and stuff right now that have, that want to have, a specific person that they have. Do you think that sperm banks should be able to disclose like the phenotypic traits of the sperm donors?
I'm generally against sperm banks because they destroy the family and they encourage single motherhood. But if the information itself, I think, would be beneficial. In general, you would want to know who you're breeding with. And that is something I would stand by. However, I don't stand by sperm banks just for another reason, which is I don't like single motherhood.
Okay, well, a lot of people that use sperm banks aren't necessarily single mothers. They're people, but yeah.
If they're in couple, I think it's great, and I think yes, they should know what kind of genes they are getting into their descendants. I personally would take issue if I had a child that was not my race or something like this that looks completely different from me.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there was a time when people, monarchs, for example, they had this idea of like dating within prestige and, we're going to create this, I'm choosing, if I'm going to choose, I'm going to choose another monarch. And it created these inherent, like really inbred bloodlines that were, accumulating deleterious mutations within them, so even within humans outside of gene editing, outside of a more homogenous dating pool via airplanes and stuff like that, like we were having problems, don't you think?
Yes, definitely, which is why I'm saying human choice is bad. It's bad, and we shouldn't trust it because we are not good engineers of nature. We are not understanding the full consequences of what we do. We can make a good choice when we do sexual selection because that has been farmed into humanity for a long time. We've been relying on it and it's been working good because it's loose enough and it's holistic enough. It's a test of your whole genome. But to have an a la carte, like you go to the restaurant and you choose your genes, that will be an absolute nightmare because we don't have the proper trade-offs and the proper measures of, is this gene having 10,000 different consequences in your life? We merely have the single site medical establishment deciding, oh yeah, it gives you this disease. Doesn't take into account what else it does in your life.
Okay, I mean, I think that that's not up for that person to make that decision for, right? That, I mean, that's the whole idea with like that's why we have human clinical trials. That's how we have the ability for these genes to be tested over time and to make sure that there aren't these unintended consequences. I mean, that I feel like that is, that's a good question for the FDA or something to make sure that there isn't happening.
The FDA will fail at doing this kind of thing because you'll never have the FDA capable of telling you down the line, if I recommend this gene to your whole population as being a gene that is good or a gene that is bad, 400 years down the line, you don't have artists anymore in your society. And it's like, what's the relationship? Oh, well, you've been fighting genes that were giving certain cognitions, and there were certain trade-offs that natural selection was taking into account, but that you didn't. The FDA can't tell you this because it doesn't operate on this time scale.
Just an FYI, we've got about 20 more minutes left. So if there are any kind of very key things you want to discuss, now would be the time to probably bring them up.
Personally, I've been exposing most of the things I wanted to discuss, so we could be slowly headed to the Q&A, whatever you guys, or if Dr. Greg has more lines of exploration, we can go for it.
Yeah, I'm confused, I guess, and I guess I'm confused where human choice is bad on, but then you said like sexual selection is good. I guess like I'm just like trying to baffle those two things. It doesn't really make any sense for me. And I do think that, like, obviously if you want 500 years of data, we have to understand 500 years of biology and experiments in order to understand that. But I think as genetics evolves, as transcriptomics evolves, and like we understand kind of like the second order epigenetic impacts of these genes and what's happening over time, I feel like, we're not just going to, our genetic analysis is not going to have a stasis, right? We're going to understand these second order impacts pretty apparently, I would say, because humans are, we want to understand things as this happens, and these things are going to be researched. What you're talking about would probably be interesting. These people are going to be followed the rest of their lives because they want to see what kind of mechanisms do change versus, what we see in animal models, at the mice model, at the human cell tissue culture level. And we can kind of see, like, are we seeing these same things track over the same time period? So I think that, I think that we can cure diseases from genetic problems and have a higher quality of life. And then these 500-year-old problems, like we can look at those there and have either more gene therapies or a different type of solution.
Well, that's the problem. There is such a thing as evolutionary dead ends, and in fact, evolutionary dead ends is what happens to most species. They get stuck into a specific ecological niche exploitation, but it's just a little too specific, and the world is just not ready to give them enough energy to survive past a certain stage of their evolution, and that's why 99% of everything out there ends up dying without leaving descent of any kind. Now, that's the problem. We are taking humanity into a dead end, and we are not trusting randomness and the natural diversity of life, which is the only thing we have. It's the only thing that brought us there. Now, you were asking, yes, it seems confusing, the difference between choice is bad when it's doctors and people making conscious choice, but it's good in a bar when a female decides to reproduce with a male. The thing is, yes, it seems oppositional, but it's not really. The fact is that female choice and male choice in partner domain has been evolving for so long, whereas our cognitive capabilities are a recent addition in the grand scheme of life. It's a very recent thing to have cultural influence that will lead, for example, so many women these days to be driven toward the work market. I mean, it's been happening in the last 100 years that this whole concept happens, where you take young women and you take their whole fertile year, you send them into a non-reproductive lifestyle where they will pursue corporate success. That's because there is such a thing as baiting by novel environments. A novel bait in a lake will catch more fish. because the fish haven't pre-evolved toward that bait. They have evolved to ignore maybe the old bait, but not the new one. And the same thing is true of cognitive temptation. Everything that guides people consciously and through recommendations and institutions is all extremely modern and hasn't passed the test of time. It hasn't passed the test of evolution. And that's why a lot of people are ending in those dead-end directions.
Okay. Okay, I mean, you've brought this up a couple times, so I was not going to mention it, but I mean, obviously, I think that giving women the choice in order not to be human incubators for their entire life and die majority of the time through childbirth is a good thing, because we are increasing the ability for them to contribute to society and to make things productively, knowledge, lots of different things, expanding the size of the economy, but also the types of technology that is created through research and stuff like that. So, I mean, my wife is getting her DNP next year, and I have a PhD, and we have 4 kids. So I don't think that this is.
You're good then.
I had to hit exponential growth. You know what I mean? So, my point though is that giving people that choice of like figuring out how they want their life to be in the future, I think that's yes, women aren't confined to second-class citizens in our society anymore, and I feel like that is a good thing, not a bad thing. And again, like I feel like you're like minimizing like randomness, the randomness through it's evolution through those random mutations that happen through DNA machine copying errors, but then also the natural selection it's both, and I feel like they're both mechanisms. I mean, you're talking about the natural selection really heavily, but I feel like they're both of them at the same time.
No, it's very important. Yes,
Yeah.
Evolution relies on the interplay between mutations, random, and natural selection. But in sexual species, there's another source of random, which is the randomness of the reassortment that happens in crossover and meiosis. So yes, very important, but precisely it's this randomness that we're abandoning, because if you follow a random pattern in your mutations and selection, but then you trust a computer or a doctor to tell you, well, when that flip happens, when you have A at this part of your DNA, we're going to change it to a T or a C or a G. That is a fight against randomness, and it's a fight against what made us what we are. It's a fight against the natural driver and engine of evolution.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that's just kind of the inevitability as humans evolved with like our technology to, like I said, like with the monarch example, and I feel like as soon as humans went global, with boats, with airplanes, that this type of it just changed. It just changed the whole game. And obviously, we don't have like another world where we don't have those things, and we have the ability to kind of like see it separately. But change like. I don't know. I mean, given the opportunity of changing that mutation in your baby, or 500 years down the line, harming your a population, a subpopulation of humans. I mean, that's so ephemeral, man. I don't feel like that's like a really like that's not a one-to-one. I don't feel like the one thing goes to the other. But I do agree in the fact that we don't think our human activity doesn't think about long-term consequences. Like, right, we can't think. And I talk to people all the time about what a billion years of prokaryotic evolution is when your lifespan and your doubling time as a bacteria is 1 hour. It's unfathomable, right? We're talking about numbers that people can't even grasp, right? So So I do think that you're right in that people can't think of downstream processes enough, and I think that climate change is a great example of that, right? Where we're not really thinking about the downstream consequences of our actions, and that's a bad thing. But I still think improving quality of life in today. Like for example, we can have AC and we can make the electricity renewable and sustainable. And then in the same guise that that long stream CO2 impact is going to be deleterious. But on the other side, we would have the that mutation, the medicine improving quality of life without necessarily the CO2 ppm accumulation that we would see in the climate change example. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. On my side, perhaps I could do a concluding statement and summary of what we've heard tonight, and maybe Dr. Greg could finish then.
Roger.
So I think what we've seen from Dr. Greg is quite striking. There is a lot of good things, and he's a good thinker and a straight thinker, and he expresses himself very clearly. However, there are flaws that we have seen glaring in his discourse, which I see is a big problem of modern medicine and of bioethicists right now. They are completely blind. They will pay lip service for what happened down the line in 400 or 500 years, but they will ultimately tell you not to care about, or that it's too far, or that we can't think about it, or that they don't have the brain to think about it. I absolutely claim the contrary. And I've already demonstrated in my book, The Revolutionary Phenotype, how we can see what's about to happen. What's about to happen is a centralization of decision-making on our evolutionary direction. This centralization has already happened in life. Happened 4 billion years ago to RNA, and RNA got completely owned by it. RNA barely survived, and what has survived, Dr. Greg tonight doesn't even call it life. It's so small that he doesn't call it life. It's a replicator. It survived as a virus, and we kicked it out of our organism. The same thing will happen to humans if we centralize our genetic direction. You cannot leave evolution to something that is non-random and that is engineering in nature. Evolution only relies on natural selection, and when it's not random, it goes the wrong way. We've seen it in domestication. We should not self-domesticate. We should not do to ourselves what we did to the pig and the chicken, because the farmer is still there to care for the dependents of the pig and the chicken. So they will keep going as long as there are farmers to care for them. But when you self-domesticate into nothingness, then you reduce your humanity, you reduce the entirety of what made you human, from your cognition to your capacity to charm, and you fundamentally give up your engagement in a sexual species to trust a computer, an institution, or a doctor. We should never trust such thing. The biggest wealth of humanity is our sexual state, and it is the randomness that is associated with its reassortment. It's the tool that made us and that maintains us the way we are. If you want a proof that evolution does not keep something in existence that doesn't serve a purpose, just look at these moles that have lost their eyes. You don't even need your eyes if you live in tunnels. And the fact is, you don't even need sexual reproduction if you have a computer that tells you what to be and what your children should be. We should never let that happen.
And that was your closing, right, Gariepy?
Yes.
Okay. We went a little backwards, but that's okay. Guys have this has been such a great conversation. I have nothing to complain about, actually. Dr. Greg, if you'd like to provide your closing statement, please.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I guess I would say I'm inherently, as a scientist, very skeptical, right? I think that scientists are skeptical, and I would say never trust scientists. I would say the science as a whole. I think that process is worthy of trust. We should have stopgaps. We should have discussions, and the holes that that were being talked about. I mean, these are brand new ways of dealing with these problems that we don't have definitive answers for, and science never has definitive answers about everything, right? We always have to do more science, do more research, do more understanding of bedrock principles of basically things that are happening in the world, and that's how we build on that knowledge. And I guess I think that JF's, excuse me, that argument that he keeps making is kind of like, I think that you could actually expand it to really anything. It's kind of like the dangers of, what is happening now, because we have people that are alive today because of vaccines or antibiotics, or what are the second order epigenetic impacts of acetaminophen usage or ibuprofen or anything, or these people that are alive with pollen, allergies. I think that if we were that reductionary and we just kind of like let it rip, I think that the whole world would be a lot different. And I think that as humans, we do have the power, in order to be unnaturally healthy. Like I said before, we are living in a world where women aren't dying from childbirth at the rates that they used to. We're living in a world that 50% of kids aren't dying and when they used to, and that's a good thing. Having those people be here and those women not being able to make those choices, I think is fundamentally a good thing for society for now and into the future. So these secondary and tertiary impacts, like, I'm not saying that they aren't important, but we should study them, right? And we should better understand things, but we should improve people's quality of life, that we can definitively improve their quality of life for going forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much. If you are interested in joining for open panel Q&A, I've been dropping the link into the live chat right now. You're welcome to come head on backstage, and we'll bring you guys up in just a second so that you can ask your questions. I was Gariepy, you said we are becoming engineers of nature, and I thought that was a pretty interesting kind of almost like a title, right, of being human. Like, we are engineering nature to make it the way we want it. And to some degree, I think we've kind of been doing that already, as Dr. Greg pointed out. Like, we've been advancing in medical technology and hopefully improving the quality of life for people overall. But there are the offsets and we're kind of backing things down in a sense to other directions where we have, what's the word, like downfalls, right? But in that instance, like, where are we drawing the line between being an engineer of nature to actually kind of self-destructive of our own nature? Do you know where that line is, or do you have a hard marker for that line between medical advancement to now we're just messing things up?
Absolutely. And it's the result of the theory of phenotypic revolutions, which is that the engineer species, they can change their whole world, and it's okay as long as they survive. And they will pass the test of existence as they live in their agriculture, their technology, their cities. And some people get punished by it. Let's say someone gets in the city, is spammed by anti-natalist propaganda. She doesn't reproduce. So that gets rid. That's still evolution in play. There is actually just one ultimate limit, which is when you start engineering yourself. Because then you break the cycle of natural evolution. Then you start catching yourself into unlivable dead ends. And then you start making the decisions that crystallize and paralyze your species into something that it should not have been and that the world is not ready to host. So the ultimate limit is, do not engineer yourself. That is the first law of the revolutionary phenotype.
All right, fair enough. And Dr. Greg,
I guess I would agree in the fact that, like, human health is tied to environmental health. So, like, for example, if these people that have these allergens are fundamentally changed because of the expansion of certain types of plants, or you could see it in the permafrost example of, the melting of the permafrost, allowing the expansion and unthawing of pathogens and viruses that could lead to huge expansions of viral populations. I mean, our health is tied to that. So I agree with you, and I actually make this comment all the time, that humans are we are engineers of our environment. It's the same way that like a beaver family is, right? A beaver is going to fundamentally change that biome, that river biome. So it's not unique to humans, but I would say that the engineering of nature has come first, and we also have done this for over 10,000 years, and that's fundamentally changed what types and how many humans are here on Earth.
Yes, I mean, we do lots of engineering that ends up affecting us, but it's still phenotypic engineering. When I say do not engineer yourself, I'm talking to DNA, actually. So do not engineer your genome, because then you break the cycle of life that maintains you into existence. But I don't disagree with evolutionary engineering. Of course, we're in it. We all live among cow farmers, agriculture. All of this was already engineering that was impacting our bodies.
Okay. And Dr. Greg, you mentioned of not worrying about, 500 years from now, further down the line, in terms of the ethics of gene editing. Like it wasn't, did I get it wrong?
No, we should care. Like, it's just that there should be, and there are going to be stopgap measures between here and 500 years from now. So in the same way that I care about, the existence of the human species going forward on, having a livable planet, in the same way that, bioethics, I think there's going to be stopgaps continually as we debate this. Like for example, there isn't any ban on human gene editing in the United States. Basically, the idea is that we test each of these markers and each of these diseases and each of these mutations individually going forward. So it's going to be a debate now, debate in the future. It's going to be an ongoing debate, and there's never going to be a all right, this is it. We're green light forever kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So do you think, though, if we establish kind of our foundations or on where we draw those lines or the ethics beyond it, do you think that would create the foundation for future debates or for future conversation surrounding even more advancement in technology and even gene editing to even a higher degree?
I don't think that it's a slippery slope kind of thing. I think that it could be bad. It could be good. And like I said, I mean, everyone in the molecular biology field understands that, this is a huge chance in order to actually improve, have a gene therapy medicine that would, radically change a lot of people's lives. So I think that there is a lot of focus on kind of like getting this right, kind of like the science communication aspect of it, the bioethics of it specifically.
Okay, fair enough. And for the supers, objective ethics came in with a big 20, says, take care of the planet, be kind to others, and be good to yourself. Science is our best path to accomplish all of these goals. I think that's pretty simple in and of itself. And of course, Texas Bully Mom says, congrats on the 15K twice. We had to celebrate at 2.0. Thank you so much. We went up, we went down, and we're getting back up again. All right, gentlemen, I've got a panel full of a few gentlemen here to ask some questions. I'll get them up right now. All right. And let's see. I've got Dr. Greg, JF, Gariepy. I'll put you guys both in the middle. Everyone else, go ahead and mute yourselves except for Greg, JF, and myself. We're going to go one at a time around Robin. Ask questions respectfully or make comments either way. And actually, JF, I'm disappointed because you introed yourself at the very beginning as I was the start of Bloodsport. And of course, this conversation is very specific and very higher level. So I didn't expect much Bloodsport out of it. But a little more out of you would have been great. Maybe our panel could bring it out of you a little bit. But Bandit, you were the first one that hit that link, and welcome back, my friend. It's nice to see you back on panel. Do you have
it's been a while.
Yeah. Do you have a question for either JF or Dr. Greg?
If you can give me 1 minute just to go a little deep on this. I'm looking at the ethical side. Okay, so I have a dog. Her name is Phoebe. Okay, she's a little Shih Tzu. So say I have CRISPR and I merge a little bit of fibers into me. Okay, what percentage of the dog makes it so that I'm not a human anymore? And the reason why I bring this up is because it gets a little dicey when you start splicing different genomes of different animals for humans. Like I know they do like octopus for translucency and changing colors and stuff like that. So morally and ethically, what makes me a person and what percentage of me that makes me human where someone could take my rights away? Because it gets a little dicey if, I'm now 2% dog and now am I human? Do I have human rights? Because technically I'm not human anymore. I'm like human, human minus or whatever you want to call that group of people, human X or whatever. So do I even have rights at this point? Can I be a slave now because now I don't have human rights? That's my gist of my argument.
Those are interesting questions. The answer is it's mostly semantic, your conception of what a human is, and perhaps you'll be mistreated, or perhaps you'll be augmented by this genetic modification, and perhaps the future of planet Earth is 2% dog, 98% humans. The same way, when we emerged from chimpanzees, we were effectively a genetic disorder at first, humanity. Humanity is a misinterpretation of the chimpanzee chromosome 2, and it was reverted and added to in the wrong sense, and it led to probably something that looked extremely ugly at first for chimpanzees, but that eventually gave birth to all of humanity. So the answer is humans is a semantic concept. You would be a creature of some sort with some DNA, just like everyone here on Earth.
Okay, I see that, but I'm looking for right. So don't take the dog percentage. Why don't we do intellect? So say the average IQ is 100. What happens if I could take a pill and now the average IQ is 150, but now this certain group of people can't afford that drug, and now they have to stay at 100 IQ, while everybody else that can afford it is now 150 IQ. They're going to go leaps and bounds over me and my genetic lineage. Like I basically, at that point, my genes are basically toast because I can't compete with someone that's 50% smarter than me.
I don't know that you can't. I would say what you're suggesting is similar to makeup. And there are women who have enough money to pay for a lot of makeup, and they will deceive you to think that they're young with that makeup. But it doesn't change the fact that your high school sweetheart is still the sexiest thing you can think about. So there's the winner at the bottom, sometimes an effect in evolution.
Did you have a follow-up to that, Bandit?
Yeah, I agree. I'm just probing questions at this point because my whole thing is I have no problem with CRISPR trying to make people like drugs better, making tuned drugs that can help people fight different diseases. I understand all the positive end. My concern is once government gets involved, what are they going to do with it? That's what terrifies me.
It's going to be horrible. Absolutely.
Because if they have a way to make it so that you lose your rights because you're now subhuman. I mean, by definition, subhuman, because you're not full human anymore, and they can delineate what that is. You lose all your rights.
In the phenotype, the naturals eventually lose all their rights because they're considered to be making bad genetic decisions for their children.
Well, this is my big argument that I was saying, that it seems like the war is on sequencing and the rights to your DNA rather than CRISPR gene editing specifically. Because again, the ability for healthcare insurance companies to access your DNA to know that you have a proclivity for cancer, and your health insurance costs are going to be higher because of that. We see that right now without CRISPR gene editing somatically. So it's like, I think that it's kind of the wrong focus. And the idea of, I would be against like somatic or germline thing on IQ, like specifically. I think, like, for example, I think my like ability to kind of, as a scientist, like I've dabbled in a lot of different sciences, backgrounds, plants, microbes, molecular biology, genetics, nanotechnology. And I don't have like this 99 percentile expertise on like molecular biology, specifically. I have like a 90th percentile. So it's like, basically the ability to kind of bring these different ideas together, non-ideal, right? It creates an ability for me to synthesize different ideas differently. A new approach now is available because I have a different background. I have a different diversity of thought. So like, I think that kind of like pushing down on and drilling down on IQ kind of loses the plot. Like we have a diversity of experiences as humans. Our backgrounds are diverse, and we are better because of that.
All right. We lost Bandit. I think his tech went out, but I'll go ahead and move on to Clay. Clay, if you wanted to ask your question or comment to either of the gentlemen.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for hosting. Thank you, Dr. Greg and JF for coming on as well. I know that Dr. Greg, you're going to have the harder position, obviously presenting the positive claim. It is what it is. So I'm going to have to come after you on that one. I'm not going to have much for JF. I was trying to come up with something. I do have something. I guess my first question for you is, in your view of sequencing, you've brought out that there are these characteristics, essentially, that when we look at it from, I guess, a health standpoint, that these are seen as either, whether it's disease or allergies or things like that, that they're weaknesses. Now, those among us who are weak, in my view, ethically, we care for them more because they are weak. We don't just simply try to remove their weaknesses. We recognize their weaknesses and assist them throughout their life. So ethically, trying to remove their weaknesses completely, entirely, doesn't sit well with me. And I'm wondering how you sit with that when ethically you see somebody with weakness and you say, oh, we got to get rid of that. Now, I'm not talking about medical problems, health problems. I'm talking about things that you see as weaknesses.
Yeah, I mean, things that I see as weaknesses are basically different changes in the genome that confer a protein difference that creates a misfolding, a protein interaction that then causes a deficiency that then causes a disease. So it's not about like a subjective, like weak or not. It's like a mechanistic understanding of like, this is a gene. This is the part that binds here. These are kind of like the protein fingers, if you will. And this finger binds here. And without this finger, you can't make that connection. So therefore, if we change that genome to have that finger, then you have that clasping of the protein. And then now you've restored this. I mean, I don't think that a parent of a child with a disease that causes 50% child mortality, or a child with childhood leukemia, is like, oh man, I have a genetically diverse child. This is an amazing thing. And in reality, it's kind of like, no, this is, I want my child not to have that disease.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was really to the heart of the question. When you mentioned like children, when parents see these defects developing within the womb, they already know that this child is going to have a defect. Now, looking at that from the standard of that is something undesirable, right? That's where I'm kind of coming from on that, because when you look at it like that, what you're telling me at that point is that that child is going to be weak at that point. And at that point, I say, well, then you should do that much more to care for it. That would be a strength.
I mean,
regardless.
I think you could. The problem with your argument is that you could have it for anything. You could have it for any medical intervention, and therefore, like, why do we even do practice medicine? Why don't we, instead of school, have each of the kids push, with 100-pound backpacks up, a mountaintop for all their years, so that we have the strongest children? Like,
I love this.
So like we don't do that. And by the way, I actually, for each of my kids, like, we did the genetic screening, to make sure that we didn't have something that's, or because there's kids that have like their intestines that are growing outside of their body or something, like they're not compatible with life, genetic changes. But we didn't even do a gender reveal thing. Like, I am more on the side of just like, let's roll the dice, and whoever comes out, I'm happy with. So that's who I think, trying to control your offspring like this is kind of like, it's just a bad omen for parenting, actually, because you're not going to be able to control your child. Just like, and the idea that you're going to be able to control its genes is kind of like this hover parenting, hyper fixation on their future, and you're not going to be able to have that as a parent. I wouldn't say that it's a good thing to have it over their genes either, and you kind of actually see this already with the cloning of pets. So basically, people can clone their pets into another pet, and you have this crazy realization when their pet, that their beloved, Fido or whatever, like, actually it's cloned into another animal, Fifi, and then now they get into some spat or something, and Fifi like bites them, or like Fifi actually barks and Fido never barked before. How dare they do that? So it's like, it's bigger. The human experience is bigger than genes sometimes.
I think you called a dog. Somebody's dog's like, I heard that.
So and then that's perfect. Like, so I think you're kind of seeing where I'm coming from on the ethical standpoint. There would be some boundaries, hopefully. And again, I told you, you do have the harder position, and that's why I'm trying not to make it adversarial or, like I'm attacking you or something, but I'm attacking the argument, specifically the ethical reasoning. Okay. And so, when it comes to that, maybe I can move on to the question for both of you. So I do have something for both of you. You both seem to be evolutionists. I'm not an evolutionist. So in your purview of your belief in evolution, at what point in evolution, or this, down the hill go, we're here now, all of a sudden, after 10,000 years or a million years or a billion years, human beings sit here and say, in the idea of genetics, now we got it. Now we can do the modifications. Now we can cut off parts, or not cut off parts in that case, if it was UJF, or because really, if we're going to stay with CRISPR and the gene editing, we're talking about cutting off and replacing, right? So if we're going to do that, then at what point in evolution do human beings have the ability to sit back and say, yeah, we got this now?
My point is, we never do, and we should never. There's no point at which you want to do this.
Yeah, I would say that you're always going to combat new diseases, new mutations, and you're kind of better understand like deleterious mutations that make diseases. And as we understand more and more about genetics, we're going to understand more and more about therapy options. So I think that you would never stop wanting to understand what's happening inside of the genome, right? Genetics wouldn't be like that. But I just need to piece for like 2 minutes, and then I'll be right back. Okay.
Sure, take your time.
My kids, family.
Yeah,
stuff.
take your time. Don't worry about it. Clay, settled or?
Yeah, I'll close it out with this. No, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate that Dr. Greg doesn't see it as animosity towards him personally. but particularly with evolution and the idea that you can splice in some genes. That idea, I see it as a modern day supremacy, essentially. That I appreciate you, JF, for coming up. I see your arguments. It's very difficult to come up with something for you because I agree pretty much with everything that you're saying. So thank you.
Absolutely. Now, I would tell you that you say you're not an evolutionist. I would challenge you. I would say you're an evolutionist who doesn't know.
No.
I'm sure you live your life in an evolutionary way. You just don't say it. And
Nope.
Christianity is a lot about transmitting evolutionary knowledge without people noticing.
Yeah, I'm not a knowledge is fact guy. So there's a problem with your argument.
I don't
but
think
I appreciate
there is,
it.
but I will keep living with my conviction that
I'll tell you what too, and here's the thing, right? So I'm up here on Sarah's panel a lot. So if you come through often at all, you'll get to know who I am and get to know that I'm very combative about my beliefs. It's just the way I am. But I appreciate it. Yeah, no, you put up a good defense of your position, so I appreciate that. And Dr. Greg did a good job too. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Clay. And I'll open it up to you. Did you have a thought? Is Greg on your list of questioning, or do you have something for Gariepy?
I just had a statement, and if Greg can hear it, great. If not, c'est la vie. I just wanted to thank them both for coming here to bring this topic up, because I do think it is an important topic. Pragmatically, I accept that CRISPR's here. It's technology we have. It's not going away. But I'm very grateful for people like JF who are getting up there and putting the ethical guardrails on the process so that hopefully we avoid those darker paths that we've historically seen in fields like this. So I guess I'm kind of in the middle of the road, but I really am glad you brought this conversation here. Thank you. Also, I'm hoping maybe we can dive into some of the ethics surrounding non-human applications of CRISPR.
Oh, yeah, that's a good thought process. All right, fair enough.
Too, in regards to this.
Fair enough. All right, maybe if the chat wants to do the gauntlet mode and they get us there, maybe we can kind of dive into that. But they know what they need to do.
Can I say something? You guys need to do that. Ben's here, right, Balderson, and I know he's gonna be deep in this conversation. You guys need to open the gauntlet.
Between you and Ben, this is going to be wild.
Yeah.
Yes, fair enough. For the win, welcome back, sir. Did you have a question or comment for either of the gentlemen up here?
I do, Sarah. Thanks for having me on. I can't remember which one of you gentlemen brought it up, but you guys were talking about royal bloodlines and then having royal bloodlines with breeding within themselves and such like that. And I'm not too familiar with the CRISPR topic, but I was just kind of doing some quick digging here. And it was just saying, like, for CRISPR-based treatment, Casgevy has reported a U.S. list price of about $2.2 million for a one-time treatment for sickle cell disease. Another gene therapy for similar conditions, Lyfgenia, launched around $3.1 million. This is obviously new technology to us in this day and age. And I kind of like want to think of this as like Wi-Fi. Like when I was growing up, the wireless Wi-Fi we had in our house absolutely sucked ass. Now it's a lot better and everything. So what do you gentlemen think about this type of technology? Is it completely foolproof if someone goes for this type of treatment? And how do you see it like spanning out in the next 5, 10, 50 years? As well as the cost basis of this. Is this something that will be available to the general public ultimately? Or is this something that's going to be held to the folks that can afford it, like these royal bloodlines, like I first brought up?
It will grow in availability and lower in price, I suspect. As far as the dangers, it will always be there because we're talking about literal genome scissors that we send in your body, sometimes with viruses to get into your cells, and we get them to cut and plug. And evolution tells us that cutting and plugging genomes is a high-risk game. Now, I'm sure it will have certain bounds and certain limits and lots of research to keep it from going wrong, but it will certainly always have a possibility to go wrong, and it will go wrong in many cases.
Dr. Greg?
Yeah,
So-
I was gonna say you're shaking your head no.
For prime editing, okay, so this is the work of David R. Liu out of Harvard. I mean, he's like my favorite scientist in the world right now. I'd recommend everyone to follow him. He is bye. I think it's the question of how many Nobel Prizes this guy gets. It's absolutely incredible, his work. But basically, the advantage of prime editing is that it doesn't use templated DNA in order to make these things. So it's not plugging a new sequence into the genome. It's using specific, edits, and it's not doing the scissors. That's native Cas9, and that is not what we use inside of the human body. It's creating changes from like A to G. Just think about like doing in Word or something, like just changing a word as opposed to copy and pasting an entire paragraph. It's very specific, very precise, and they do off-target sequencing already, so they can basically outside of the cell, it's called in vitro, kind of test it and make sure that there aren't any adversarious changes that are being made. And then they sequence the cell before and after the prime editing to know that there aren't anything done. And it's in the papers, like they show the sequencing. It's well known, it's well studied. This is why it was so dangerous. The Chinese scientists that did the gene editing in those twins, because they didn't have those safeguards in play. But again, in my example, I mean, we're talking Model T to 2026 F1 car right now. I mean, we're talking crazy advancements in biochemical engineering in order to get prime editing in David R. Liu's lab going. And the question is exactly right. And the big question right now is access. So right now you have diseases that are from mutations inside of your genome. So the first cases that they're trying to change are like one base pair, or like where they're really close together, where they can just change a couple of edits, and that confers the disease. But like maybe there's multiple copies of that gene inside of your genome. There's multiple loci, right? There's different places or combinations of those different mutations, and basically that requires a personalized medicine to be created for every single person, for every single disease. And again, that's extremely costly. That you have to basically go from cell tissue culture to creation of transgenic mice that have that specific sequence to the therapy for every single person, for every single mutation. And this is, again, David R. Liu. I think this is going to be the Nobel Prize winner, personally. Basically, it doesn't matter about the sequence of your specific mutation. He created the prime editing tool in order to fix the problem, no matter what your personal genetic mutation is. So it's absolutely incredible. It came out December 2025, and basically the idea is, like, with one medication we could potentially cure 100 diseases as opposed to one medicine for one person. It's a huge breakthrough that just came out.
So JF, you're pretty confident in just saying if you start monkeying with things, we're going to have problems. Dr. Greg, you're saying things like the other side of the spectrum, the glass is half full. This is the way it's going to go. This is what we need to be able to do. In my personal experience, my father, he took the Pfizer vaccine and he's completely effed up from it. They say it's Parkinson's. It's not Parkinson's. This is new technology that they claimed it to prevent against COVID. And now he has a whole host of other problems. His spike protein count is completely off the charts. I mean, hundreds of times more than anyone should ever have in their body. So what's interesting about it is that when I looked up his lot number, and then that corresponds to symptoms that specific lot got, the number one thing that shows up is product storage error. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not a symptom. So why is that the first thing that shows up? And to me, if that's the first thing that shows up, I have more questions about the technology than anything.
Absolutely. Very important point you raise. And it leads me to mention something I wanted to talk about tonight. We didn't really quite do it. we have the problem that modern science and the I fucking love science dude bros, they are so enthusiastic, but they will systematically tell you to commit to a line of action without knowing. And they will tell you that, well, we'll know down the line. 100 years from now, we will know. But you're asking for human sacrifice. You're asking for your capacity to empirical study to be assumed in advance. And this is what we've done with a lot of the vaccines. And it's what we do whenever we consider a medication that's been tested for 6 months, 1 year, but not 50 years, not 100 years, not demanding down the line, does that person make babies? So yes, we're not asking the right questions. And empiricism is the huge trap of modernity, this delusion that we know and that we can know and that we will know.
So science, I'm sorry what's happening with your dad, but science shows that it's more likely going to be long COVID than anything with the mRNA vaccines. I mean, if you think about spike protein count, it's going to be a lot more. The viral load is going to be a lot more with a latent SARS-CoV-2 infection than just one administration of a vaccine. There's just no self-replicating mechanism inside of your cells to make more mRNA for those, through that vaccine. So, and people concurrently get the vaccine, but that doesn't create a blockage from a virus still landing on your face, still getting into your system, still getting infecting your body. And the truth is that your dad, if you had a neurological disorder, the vaccine probably saved him from even worse impacts because it decreased his viral load. So it could have been way worse for your father. That's what the science actually shows.
I would disagree with the statement that RNA doesn't have mechanism to be carried and multiplied into the body. There's the L1 system, there's the retroactive viruses, the retroviruses. They can get into loops, and they can, if a virus catches some of these viral RNA and changes its evolution as a consequence, it could very well lead to problems down the line, integration to the human genome, and grave health effects.
Come on, man. It's like the mRNA vaccines don't have reverse transcriptase delivered inside of it. And the translation into proteins, it just needs the cytoplasm. Meanwhile, your genome is inside your nucleus. So it's completely...
But that's the problem with your approach. It's like, because we're not delivering it, it's not going to happen. Well, nature is very different. There is plenty of reverse transcription happening everywhere with viruses that exist already. People have them. It lives inside of them. And you're going to have actions of recombinations, and you don't know what are the consequences of this. But it's not because you don't deliver it that it doesn't happen.
I mean, and it sounds like too, Dr. Greg, that part of your argument is that we all have some sort of medical issue. There's a problem. And now we can use this technology to be able to fix said problem. But if that problem was created from vaccines, what if we just stop using vaccines and we quit double downing on all of these problems ultimately?
We know what the life was like without vaccines, and the fact is that 150 million people have had their lives saved from vaccines. 5 million a year are saved every year. 4 million children, 1 million adults every year. So like we know it's not like this thing that we don't understand. And long COVID exists from SARS-CoV-2, not from vaccines. I mean, there's people that I have in my community, like moms that come in and say their anti-vax son refused to get the vaccine, and now he has he's losing the smell, taste. He has tremors. People have vertigo. It's a neurological disease, long COVID, that we are like barely understanding, and the long-term consequences are seen outside of people that have had the vaccine. And so, like, viruses exist. The problem isn't the pharmaceutical companies. The problem isn't vaccines. The problem is viruses, and people discount the harm and ways that people died from smallpox, from measles in the 1900s. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people. And we live in a world where you have the liberty and the freedom to go to Coachella or EDC or these large sporting events where you don't live in fear of getting a virus, a communicable disease, and basically people discount them because vaccines are that effective and medicine is that effective.
I mean, to the point of calling something long COVID, it sounds like it's the medical establishment's way of being able to cover up an injury ultimately. The same way why kids get acne, for example. We came up with this thing called acne. Well, if they didn't have all these effing vaccines, maybe they didn't get the acne to begin with, and we just labeled it that, and it's not a vaccine injury.
No, it's
JF?
Absolutely. We don't have ways to measure how the modern assumptions of medicine are causing a lot of the things we observe. But we do know that the Amish are doing freaking good.
The Amish vaccinate as well. So this is a common trope that is just incorrect. They absolutely use modern medicine. I think like 60% of the Amish vaccinate. And again, like it's just this, it's incorrect. And we absolutely know, long-term studies, these things have been studied by independent countries with independent funding, independent researchers. And this is a separate and adversarial group from pharmaceutical companies, from governments. These are separate entities that are all brake checking and testing one another to make sure that this is happening.
And that's another interesting aspect of it is who's doing the testing. It's like asking the government to investigate itself. You're asking the medical establishment to be able to say, hey, go and do this third-party research for me. And then they give you the data that you want to hear. I hate to break it to you, Dr. Greg, but we got much to learn here, brother.
I think we may.
You're conflating the pharmaceutical companies with the FDA, with governments, with the researchers, and you're kind of lumping them all together. Again, you just fundamentally don't understand the process, which is fine. I can explain it to you, but I'm just saying that you're misinformed.
I think we may very well have just found a new topic between Dr. Greg and JF, one that seems to maybe bring a little more heat out of the two of them. But for the win, out of respect to Dr. Greg and JF on their time, I'm going to move forward if you don't mind.
Thank you both.
Doc, do you have a question or comment? Hopefully you learned from last night's panel what not to do, young man.
Yeah, right, Sarah. Yeah, Dr. Francois, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I'm sorry if it's okay if I call you Dr. Francois, but so I have one question, and I hope it's not too sharp. Is that so I can see. I like that you brought AI into the conversation early. That was very helpful. So I think the audience should be very appreciative of that too. But also, we look at OpenAI and we can say that these big network, these companies based on a network. That are priced this way, they report revenue this way, they hire this way, they impact the markets this way. We can say that the same actors and agents, if we're not rapidly, it's not Jurassic Park yet, but it's the same people, the people that when I think about risk personally, it's the same people that have chosen to amortize some of the AI technology, amortize back into education institutions, including research. And so, am I reading this wrong? Is it actually the case that there really is not such a ethical threat? It's the case already that collective decision making, because people are the threat, but people have decided to spread this stuff out, right? So there's power or capability concentrated in one person. Is that an accurate way to look at it, or am I undermining something about the technology that I'm not appreciating at this time?
No, you're right. It's a system that is evolving from economic pressures and people's decision. But where I don't agree with your statement fully is when you say, therefore, it's not ethical. No, it's not because people choose it that it's necessarily ethical. People can choose things because they're poorly informed. I believe that one of the very bad level of information of people is about long-term evolutionary dangers on AI and on AI gene editing. So as long as they don't have the information, it doesn't matter that they're choosing that path. It's just that all they have is doctors that are telling them, yes, it's better for you. And as long as you don't have informed consent, you don't have consent. And yes, it remains a non-ethical issue to me, an issue of ethics.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. Not that it's not it's not right, because I mean, abductively it makes sense. I would tend to agree with your position that humans are, even though like the unit economics or ethical choice, I believe in Dr. Greg's version of this, that yeah, if you can afford a treatment or you can afford to make progress on even rare diseases or incurable diseases, that makes sense. However, back into the like an evolutionary argument regarding the system, I might bring up that you know, these types of systems, it's right. I mean, it's even when it's even difficult to differentiate between genetics and genomics, except in cases like maybe PTSD or something relating to Alzheimer's or something like this. Like it's very difficult, I think, to actually base something on an inference. It's not meant to close the conversation, but to say that there's an independent inference about genetic factors and human civilization and human life that becomes loud because mental illness is important. We can't undermine this sort of approach. I would still think that you know, there's just with the absence of information, you know, I don't know, maybe it's this undermining point, and sorry if I'm just blabbering and talking, but it is undermining, I think, to my original point, where it's like, well, if people can't solve for the idea that these important spaces become unbridled because you can't have inference about them, you know, maybe I'm missing a chaos. I was missing a. I gotcha. I was missing a. That's what you told me. You said that, you know, there's this almost like chaos or stochastic sort of element, and that's the part I think I was missing. Sorry.
Not sure where you're headed with that one, but yeah, I've given my response to your previous intervention.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Doc. I appreciate you. Spin, do you have a question or comment for either of the gentlemen?
Yeah, I want to know if there's a vaccine or any type of treatment in your wilted mind that could fix paraplegicism or paraplegic or quadriplegic. Is that genetic?
I don't know.
Quadriplegia normally is not genetic.
What?
What?
What? Heard what
if you're talking about the breaking of the spinal cord, there are
is there a vaccine that'll fix that?
Well, I would be surprised that there's a vaccine right now. There's people who hope to develop stem cell research, surgery tactics with regrowing of the spinal cord, but it's not developed yet.
Yeah, I was going to say like some type of people are looking at like limb regrowth and like that kind of thing, seeing how we can better understand and like transplant that type of gene into humans. But that, again, that's like the transhumanist approach that is like way next level. That I mean, that's way far off.
Well, you'd have to introduce, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say like can't lizards regrow the tails or something like that?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I know there's the stem cell research, but I wouldn't say necessarily a vaccine, because the vaccine is like preventative of
vaccines are really safe. They've been very safe since, if you look at the history
not
of
the point,
Western
Doc.
Europe.
Mute back up. It's
safe,
not your turn.
actually. Yeah.
Mute back up, Doc. All right, Mr. Balderson, last but certainly not least, your thoughts to the gentleman.
Dr. Greg, exactly what percentage of the human DNA do we understand, and understand exactly what it does and how it interrelates to the other pieces?
We just did the best sequencing of the human genome, including some of the ends of the telomeres that we couldn't do before. So I would say, I mean, through next generation sequencing, we understand if like, I think it's like insanely high coverage now. So I would say high 90s, 95 plus.
That's very odd, because the highest I've ever seen is 10%.
No, that's like a misunderstanding of like the old terms like junk DNA. So you have things that are expressed or in those regions of DNA that are in between those. And we kind of understand now that those parts that don't make proteins basically have a big impact on the parts that do encode proteins specifically. So there's like transcription factors. I mean, that's the jargon word, but it's basically the ability for those genes to like turn on and off, be regulated. Regulatory elements are all in there.
Oh, I definitely agree that it's a mechanism that everything interrelates, and when you don't understand how the entirety of the thing works, like I seriously can't imagine letting a kid that's only ever done an oil change and is a real expert on oil changes dig in and change my heads out. I just possibly can't imagine that. I also appreciate during your speech where you said, or your part of the talk where you said that you think that part of the problem is bad advertising, bad information, things like that. A lot of falsities getting thrown around. And so I'm sure that you've got to understand that part of the problem with the lack of faith in the medical institution at this point comes from the recent medical things, such as subjecting people to something that they didn't have any long-term testing and results on, and not informing people that this was an experiment on their bodies and we didn't really know how that was going to pan out, and not telling them and breaking the Nuremberg codes in doing so. And so the medical industry in general has shown to have horrible ethics and has no problem breaking their own ethics and in the to the good, as you like to seem to point out. You like to keep pointing that part out. But the problem is we don't know the bad. And this system that we're talking about has only been around for about 30 years. We generationally don't have any idea what this is going to do to people, not even a tiny little one. And you guys and your community,
You're just making shit up, Ben. You're making shit up.
Shut the fuck up, Doc.
All right, I'm just going to remove you because that's 2 for 2. Go ahead, Ben. I apologize.
Your community has shown that it'll break its own ethics and rules that it even made for itself, and use terms like safe and effective, and then come out in a series of weeks saying 100% effective, 90% effective, 80% effective, 50%. You know what? You better take 8 or 10 of these. It only works for a little tiny bit. We aren't really sure what goes on. Stay 6 feet apart also has no medical backing whatsoever. It was just something we bandied about in the office. That when these are the things that you make rules, that your community has made rules on us, and now you're talking about going in and actually editing our DNA, something you don't fully understand, and you're going to tell us not that we're guinea pigs and we hope this works out well, but that this is safe and effective, which is what your most of your spiel's kind of been.
Okay, so yeah, basically 100% knowledge of every single bit of and how it works. The human genome is very different than us saying that viruses are dangerous and therefore we are at war with viruses and we are trying to figure out.
Are you building a straw man over here or something?
Well, let him finish. Let him finish, Ben.
Vaccines are the most effective way to train your natural immune system in order to fight off these viruses. So that's why vaccines exist. We understand them. Another thing, the mRNA with lipid nanoparticle, that chassis was it was in development since 1987. It's been used in animals since 2000s, and they've been the personalized gene therapy, or in cancer treatment since 2015. So it's been in humans, and people absolutely. It's safe and is shown to be extremely effective. Actually, the first Moderna and Pfizer vaccines were 95% efficacy, which is insanely high. It's a huge success story, actually. So it sucks, man. As a scientist, and we take your tax money and become the world experts in these things, and we create these new paradigms and are the envy of the world, and people look at us like, wow, they really were able to figure something out. That's an incredible achievement, and you should be proud. Like I'm proud as a patriot of the United States science and engineering that we do here, and I wish that other people could be patriotic about it. It's patriotic to get vaccinated. Public health. I mean, I care about the 1.2 million people that died from COVID. I mean, people like to talk about that and downplay it, but I think that's disgusting. It's anti-American.
You guys do love your stolen valor when every historical chart shows that it wasn't vaccines. It was actually just human living conditions. We got things like indoor plumbing, you know, being able to washing our hands, running water. All those things you guys just like stealing that credit. It's hilarious to do. I did enjoy the patriotic spiel at the end where you're a patriot or if you don't believe this bullshit I'm spitting out, you're freaking not patriotic. That was hilarious.
It's true. I mean, it's true. To look and create conspiracies and downplay the death of 1.2 million Americans is sick, in my opinion. And to create conspiracies,
what's sick is that the percentage of people harmed would have gotten that thrown off the market.
Hold on. Hold on. You're both talking over each other, and I can't hear it.
The blood is on the hands of RFK and these people that are pushing disinformation about all these vaccine preventable illnesses. It's not just COVID, and people erroneously said, and I called them out at the time because I've been doing science communication on YouTube and Twitch since November 2020, that we're not anti-vaccine, we're just against this vaccine. And obviously that's not the case now with the rise in measles and the rise of measles in Canada and in the United States, by the way. And it's not okay. So the science community is going to be fighting back even harder now.
Yeah. Absolute complete denial that you purposely did human guinea pig testing on the general populace against the Nuremberg codes. Fully broke them. Don't even care. Those were made in America in order to regulate people like yourself after World War II, where you decided for the good of humanity, you could do some real sick and twisted testing and do some real nasty things. That's called lack of ethics. Something you guys find a super slippery slope that you figured you could not tell people that these had no long-term testing, but
they did.
Label it. Again, false advertising, safe and effective. We haven't really tested it, but safe and effective. And it had higher
vaccination programs. If you have a problem with vaccination programs, you have a problem with George Washington, because one of the reasons that we actually won the Revolutionary War is because he inoculated his troops against smallpox, and that's one of the reasons that we won. So the first public health campaign was by George Washington himself, and it was for vaccinating or inoculating against smallpox. So
are we pretending like that's the same as mRNA?
Well, why do you think smallpox was eradicated?
Are we pretending like that's the same?
Yes, they're vaccines. And
we are? Holy shit.
You're admitting then
Holy shit.
Wait, so you just admitted that the smallpox vaccine was safe and effective for eradicating smallpox?
I didn't say all vaccines don't work. I never said that. You just built this awesome straw man because you needed something to fight because you're nonsense. It's indefensible, the crap that your community has done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so rather than do that, you built a nice little straw man. And
okay, so then can you agree that people should be vaccinating against MMR and the measles virus that's going around?
There's certain historical vaccines, yes, that
Can you say that the MMR vaccine is safe and effective?
Had tiny VAERS reports compared to what the most recent ones did. They would have thrown those out so far out. In fact, they even removed their temporary authorizations and said, no, these do not meet snuff. But they went ahead and told people they were safe and effective.
Can you say that?
For the time that it was available, they told them that nice catchy advertising, safe and effective. It was a good one.
VAERS is a product made by the CDC, and that is like
it's not a product; it's a reporting system.
It's not just like this thing. I mean, you guys figured it out because of COVID, but it's been in existence long before that. I mean, can you just say that the MMR vaccine is safe and effective?
I can say that it has a known quantity of, and it's a fairly small one of adverse reactions.
Do you think that the MMR
vaccine, people that have the adverse reactions, to those people that have the adverse reactions, we get to actually inform them and say, there's a small chance, it's 0.5, that you could have this list of reactions. Now it's on you to choose whether you want to subject yourself to that and possibly receive these benefits or not. You get an informed, choice. That's something that was required by the Nuremberg codes to keep unethical people like you from doing things to uninformed people. And even though they agreed to it, they're uninformed, and you lied and gave them really clever advertising.
Nobody lied.
Yeah.
No. I mean, can you say
long-term testing?
Can you say long-term testing is more deadly than the vaccine?
Was there long-term testing?
You tell me, you're the expert.
I just read things. And was there long-term test? See, here's the part where it's real disingenuous.
I mean, you're
because it's not defensible.
Right
you
now,
can't call it safe and effective without the testing to back it up. Where I can go to that smallpox patient who I'm going to vaccinate and say, we have the testing, we have the long-term studies and results. We can tell you even generationally what kind of effects we see from this. Here you go. Here's the information. Here's your informed choice. Would you still like to proceed? And you people have decided that that's not part of the sequence. You've decided the Nuremberg Code is yours to break.
No, that's not how public health works. You don't get to decide. You don't get to decide that some people are going to live or die based off of their immune compromised status. The fact that I mean, you're trying to basically off everyone that has. Like,
you do try all the dumbest tactics. Do the Patriot one again. I like that one.
Yeah, I mean, it is patriotic to care about public health. So yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Thank you. Nice. You try the dumbest fucking tactics.
I wanted to see if Gariepy had a thought to add in on that. You're just kind of sitting there smiling. I don't know if you wanted to chime in.
I stand against the medical establishment, and what we're hearing from Dr. Greg is not super clearly said, but kind of leans toward a fascistic medical system where you are being decided what's injected in your arm because you could hurt others. And that is the beginning of the invasion of medicine into fascism. And I totally object against it. And the medical sector is totally decredibilizing itself with this attitude. And eventually people will just leave them behind. And you can develop your science in your ivory tower and no one will care about it because we'll all know the dangers of it and the carelessness of saying we will decide for you. Now, I have to go, Sarah. I will say in conclusion, measles gang, what's up? Unvaccinated, keep going. Bye-bye.
Bye, Gariepy. That was so fun.
Thank you.
Dr. Greg, they've almost earned themselves the gauntlet. So I know that you could potentially, Gariepy, you want me to kick you out?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm going to kick him out.
Almighty Nate lifted half the load for you guys. You know you want to see me keep chewing at this unethical tree. It's funny. Ethics is the debate prompt.
But Dr. Greg, I know you wanted to step away at the 2-hour mark.
It's okay. If they don't deserve to. They don't get to deserve. They have me. They're stuck with me.
Almighty Nate gave another. He just said, you know what? Whatever. I'm done dealing with Sarah complaining about not hitting.
Jesus.
Oh no.
Nate. Hey, what's up, dude? I'm Greg. You can be my friend. Hang out on my TikTok stream. Hang out, whatever you want.
There it is.
All right. Well, I will, if Ben, I know you had a bone to pick. Spin, it sounded like maybe you wanted to ask another question. Spin, I'll go ahead and hand it to you.
Many.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and set up the gauntlet while you're asking your question, Spin, and we'll give Ben and Greg a little chill time because I foresee a speed date in their future. Dr. Greg, do you have a hard out or do you just kind of want to play it by ear?
I'm good right now. We're good right now. So probably like 30, 40 minutes probably.
Perfect. All right. Spin, why don't you go ahead and then ask your question. We'll go from there.
Well, I when you were young, were you vaccinated against anything?
Everything. I get all the vaccines every single year, and I've never denied any of them.
Mm-hmm. So when I asked the question earlier, you didn't know.
What?
Do you remember the question that I asked about a vaccine for, getting me able to use my legs?
Well, that wouldn't be a vaccine, though. A vaccine is a preventative
we were talking about
maintenance.
vaccines. That's
Right,
why I brought it up.
but
I think a gene therapy
but-
approach that would be completely different. A
But
vaccine,
that would be a vaccine, wouldn't it?
It's not a vaccine.
no. A vaccine is a piece of a virus that is presented to your body so that it can mount an antibody response to it and remember which antibody killed that virus, and then it creates an ability to make more of those antibodies inside of your body. So it's a natural immune system. Like your body needs to learn how to move or create those muscle fibers, those nerves, all those type of things, and regenerate them. It's not a vaccine that it's not a foreign or a cell that it's fighting. It's like more of a deleterious like change in the genome that needs to change.
So the next question is the COVID vaccine. I just want to be clear before, you're for it or against it?
100% for it.
Okay. And the COVID vaccine unalived a lot of people.
It didn't. That's disinformation.
That's disinformation.
Yeah, it's completely false.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they actually the FDA, RFK's own FDA actually just had to discreetly put out a report that it didn't cause a bunch of kids to lose their lives like people have been reporting. I mean, even RFK's own FDA can't actually produce any studies to say this, and he says this in his hearings, that the vaccine actually killed more people than the virus itself, which is wrong, dangerous, and it's only going to harm more people.
And before you continue on, Spin, compliments of Almighty Nate, Texas Bully Mom, Iotin, and Objective Ethics. We are getting our gauntlet. So if you're watching over on the Raging Tomato side on YouTube, I have set up the raid to move over to the gauntlet. If you already know where you're going, please feel free to get there now. Otherwise, enjoy the ride. If you're watching on Twitch, X, Kick, or anything else, I'm going to go ahead and shut that down. If you want to join us, go to YouTube at the Gauntlet Debate. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow.
All right, back to you.
I'm done.
Spin. All right. I want to, before I let Ben back in there, because I know it's going to